Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the size of the primary arms horseshoes that they have in their LPVOs. Okay, so they're not all the same size, and different size horseshoes are going to help us more or less at different distances. So we want to know what it is, right? What are the pros and cons? And I'm going to give you the size of the horseshoes, so that even if you can even look at other brands with other other designs, right? Even if they're leader lines, you can look at the space between the lines and figure out what's going to work best for you. Okay, so there's three scopes I was working here with. So first I was working with a 65 MOA circle dot, right, in this red dot. Right now, the reason why I started off with this is because the 65 MOA circle just works so good. Okay, why does it work so good? Well, here's the thing. I'm looking at three different distances: 15 yards, which is CQB distance, right? 15 yards, 50 yards, and 100 yards. Okay, so with the 65 MOA circle, right? Just looking at the circle, we're ignoring that tiny little dot in the middle because I can't, if I'm moving and shooting, I can't even see that tiny little dot in the middle. So we're ignoring that. So just looking at the circle, right? At 15 yards at CQB distance, which is where that paper is right over there, that circle dot is going to, edge of the circle is going to be here, other edge is going to be here. So that circle dot is going to be half the width of a man at 15 yards. Okay, so that's really easy to center on the man and take your shots really quickly, moving and shooting, just bursting into a room, whatever, right? Because that circle is shoulder to center of chest. Okay, really easy. Now, when we go to 50 yards, okay, the man shrinks down. So what happens is at 50 yards, as the man shrinks down, basically that circle is going to open up so that it's almost twice the width of a man, almost twice. Not exactly twice. It's going to be just a little bit less than twice. So at 50 yards, again, really easy to center on a man, okay? And then at 100 yards, what's going to happen is that circle is going to open as the man shrinks down. The circle is going to appear like it's almost twice the width of a man, right? Maybe just a little bit more. But again, that's, twice the width of a man. I'm talking about my arm span here. Again, that's really easy to center on the man, okay? So with the 65 MOA circle at 15 yards, 50 yards, 100 yards, really easy to get it on target and shoot, okay? And that's not, even without illumination, just using an etched reticle, really easy. Because again, we're dealing with something that's either half the width of a man or twice the width of a man. Okay, so it's easy to get on a man or a man-sized target and take those shots. Now, the problem with LPVOs is that there's other information out there that wants to exist in that same area, right, where that 65 MOA circle is. Okay, because here's the thing: the red dot, nice and light. Okay, with the LPVO, I'm putting 1.5 pounds on the gun, right, between scope and mount. So for that extra weight, I want more than just magnification and an aiming point. Okay, I want auto ranging, right? I want to be able to judge the distance based on the size of a man really quickly. Okay, I want some type of a bullet drop or a mill grid that I can use for holdovers. I want with the mill grid, I can use that to self-spot shots based on where they fall. I can lead for wind. So with an LPVO, I want, just because it's heavier, if I'm accepting that extra weight, I want to be able to get a lot more information. So a lot of that information is going to be in that same area where the 65, where the edges of that 65 MOA circle is. So at the bottom, right, we want some type of a Christmas tree with some type of a bullet drop with mill grid, right, so we can self spot. So that's going to open up the bottom, right? So that's why we can't have a complete circle. We're going to have a horseshoe, okay? And then further up, right, on the sides, we want some type of auto ranging so that we can quickly figure out how far a man-sized target is. Okay, so it's typical with the primary arms LPVOs. They will give you auto ranging at 300, 400, and 500 yards in this winged system. On the PLX, they go all the way out to 800 yards. So again, that's in that same area where that horseshoe is. Okay, so because of that, what they had to do, right, or I suspect they had to do, was either shrink down the horseshoe, right, so it's inside of that auto ranging information, or enlarge it, right, make it really big so that the auto ranging is inside of the horseshoe. So the horseshoe has to be either bigger than the auto ranging or smaller than the auto ranging. Okay, they can't occupy the same space. So with the M8, right? This is the M8. That's on the primary arms PLX scope. Okay. What they did is they shrunk it down. They made that horseshoe smaller. Okay. So instead of the horseshoe being 65 MOA, okay, it is 40 MOA. 40 MOA. So let's figure out now what that does for us when we put it on the man. Okay. So when with the 40 MOA horseshoe, right, at 15 yards, right, 15 yards, your CQB distance, right, that horseshoe now, because it's shrunk down, it's about a quarter of the width of the man. Okay, so that's basically the size of my fist. Okay, so what I have found, right, especially moving and shooting, remember we're just working with the etched reticle here, right? If you put on the illumination, whole other story. Illumination works great, you know, you can see it. But when you're working just with the etched reticle, the 40 MOA horseshoe, which is a quarter of the width of a man, is too small, right? So especially if the target is dark, right, black shirt or black target, it is very difficult to center it on the target. Okay. Now the answer to that is yes, you can put on illumination. We'll talk about that afterwards, but the point is that you have to have illumination at that CQB distance, because otherwise, if you have a black etch reticle on a dark target, you're not going to be able to center it. Okay. Now at 50 yards, what happens is at 50 yards, because the man shrinks down, that horseshoe is now the width of a man's shoulders to shoulders. So at 50 yards, it's really easy to center on the target, right? 50, he's actually just a tad bit smaller. No, he's actually shoulder to shoulder. He's shoulder to shoulder. At 100 yards, right, the man shrinks down a little bit more, so he's just a little bit smaller, right? So now the horseshoe is going to expand, right? As the man shrinks down, as he goes out to 100 yards, the horseshoe is going to appear to open up. So that's still easy enough to center on the man. So the 40 MOA horseshoe works really good at 50 yards because that's going to be shoulder to shoulder. It's going to work good at 100 yards because it's just going to be just outside of his shoulders. Easy to center. The problem is at 15 yards. At 15 yards, the man opens up, right, because he's closer, so the man appears to get bigger. So now that horseshoe, you're trying to take that horseshoe shrunk down, right, relatively speaking. So now it's about the size of my fist, and if you got a dark horseshoe on a dark target, it's really hard to center. Okay, so that's the problem with that I had found with the M8 Raptor. Right, it at CQB distance, it's hard to center. Now it does have leader lines. It's got these outer posts that come in. The outer posts seem to be a little bit too far away to easily judge where the center is. Okay, so they're there. Okay, they're helpful, but they're just a little bit too far out to really help you center on the target. Now let's take a look at the primary arms 1 to 10 GLX. Okay, so this has a 120 MOA Horseshoe, okay, 120 MOA. So it's roughly twice the size of that 65 MOA horseshoe circle that we were talking about before. Okay, 100, a little bit less than twice. But 120 MOA. So how does that appear? So at 15 yards, right, at CQB distance, the 120 MOA horseshoe is shoulder to shoulder. Okay, put it on shoulder to shoulder. Really easy to center. It's thick enough you can see the edges. Boom. At CQB distance, it prevails. It's really easy to work with. I don't need illumination. I don't even think about putting illumination on because I can see it. It's just shoulder to shoulder, right? On a man-sized target, easy to get on target. At 50 yards, what's going to happen is now your man is going to shrink down, right? So as your man shrinks down, as he goes further out, the 120 MOA horseshoe opens up to roughly twice the width of the man. So at 50 yards, it's really easy to center the man, right? Because it's not too big. It's easy to, figure out where the center is. Okay, roughly, the circle is going to be roughly the size of my arms here, tips of my fingers here. Center the man in the center, take your shots. No problem at all at 50 yards. The problem that I have is at 100 yards, okay? Because at 100 yards, what's going to happen is that the 120 MOA horseshoe the man's going to shrink down. The horseshoe is going to get really wide, okay? And what's going to happen is that the man appears to be about one-fifth the width of the horseshoe. So the man is going to be about a little bit smaller than my fist, and let's say my chest here now is the horseshoe. The man's going to be like my fist over here. So that can be hard to center, right? Especially if things are a little bit dark, right? If you got the man's dressed dark and then and the horseshoe's dark, it can be really hard to center, or the background is dark. Now there's a solution to that. Solution to that is simply put on the illumination. Once you put on the illumination, you can see it. But the point is that you need to put on the illumination. The other option is that at 100 yards, you can just go up to 2 power. Okay, if you go up to 2 power, what happens is now everything, because what happens with the M10, there's an inner horseshoe, right? So you got 2 horseshoes. You got an outer horseshoe, and then you got the inner horseshoe that appears like a dot, when it shrinks down. But as you go up to 2 power, it starts opening up a little bit. That's now easier to get on the man. Okay, so with the M10, you've got 2 options. Okay, so between these 2 scopes, right? Well, actually 3 scopes we're talking about. Talking about the 65 MOA red dot, right? That's going to work great in all your, at 15 yards, 50 yards, and 100 yards. You got the benefit of a much lighter optic, but the problem is that you don't have a whole lot of information. You can't really, you can do auto ranging. There's a way to do it, but again, it's a little bit more work. There's no wind holes. There's really no bullet drop, although some red dots do have an ACSS red dot that does have bullet drops. But the point is that you're getting less information. But the major drawback with the red dot is that it's dependent on power. Okay, so that Holosun 510C, solar powered, battery backup, almost never runs out of power. However, it's electronics. Okay, so forget about the power running out. Let's say the electronics themselves can fail. So if the electronics fail, you just don't have a red dot. Okay, let's say you exceed the, because it's supposed to be waterproof up to a certain depth. Let's say that gets exceeded, right? Or even if whatever, water somehow gets in there because the rubber seals wore out or something. The point is that once the electronics go, it's not going to work. Okay, so basically the red dot optic then becomes a paperweight. Nice thing about the LPVO, it has the etched reticle. So the illumination is kind of like an afterthought, right? So these scopes are basically meant to use without illumination. Okay, the illumination is there to kind of help you when you need it. Okay, but you shouldn't be dependent on it. Reason why you shouldn't be dependent on it is because they have very poor battery life. Um, and you know, I mean, the batteries always seem to run out. Now, both of these over here have um, basically auto off and shake awake. But what happens is if you're moving, even if I put the illumination on, if I sling it over my back and I'm moving and I'm walking all day, or it's in the car all day bouncing around, it's always going to be on, right? Because of the motion. So it's never going to go to sleep. So given that the LPVOs have poor battery life, it's going to run out. So the two ways I have found to to best use the illumination in an LPVO, either just keep it off and only put it on when you really need it, okay? Or if you're gonna keep it on, right, because you think you might need it that day, put it in a very low setting, like light setting 2. So when you're outdoors, you're not gonna see it at all. But if you happen to go indoors into a basement or something, now in that setting 2, you will be able to see it, okay? So those are the two best ways I have found to use the illumination in an LPVO so that you don't run out the battery. Now, in most cases, basically, I just keep the illumination off and I work without illumination, just using the etch reticle. And one of the reasons why I first got into LPVOs is because of that weakness with red dots where, hey, you know, sooner or later, right, given enough time, 5 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100, you know, let's say I'm passing down this rifle to my children, right? Sooner or later, the electronics of a red dot, right? I mean, if I'm passing down this rifle, right, with the red dot on it, sooner or later, the electronics are going to fail, okay? And if the electronics fail in the red dot, it's a paperweight. You can't use this to aim anymore. However, with the LPVO, because it has the etched reticle, okay, as long as the glass is not damaged, okay, this could basically work 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 500 years from now. They could dig this thing up. Maybe electronics and battery, maybe they don't even make those batteries anymore, right? But as long as the glass is there and the etched reticle is there, it's going to work. It's going to be usable, you know, 500 years in the future, right? Because it's not dependent on electronics. Basically the primary way to aim this is with the etched reticle. Okay? So as far as these two scopes, M8 and M10, right? Both primary arms, you know, both ACSS systems, just different size horseshoes. With the M8, right, which we said had the 40 MOA horseshoe, works good at 100 yards, works good at 50 yards, doesn't work good at 15 yards at CQB distance because that horseshoe is just too small, okay? So here's the thing, at CQB distance, that's basically like an emergency type of situation, okay? The gun has to work its best. The aiming device has to work its best at CQB distance, because at CQB distance, you don't have too many options. You have to return fire. You got to be able to immediately defend yourself. Getting to cover, getting a different gun, you know, may not be an option at 15 yards, okay? Now, so with the other one, right, with the 110 GLX, that has the 120 MOA horseshoe. So that one is the opposite. That one works great at CQB distance, right? At CQB distance, we said it's shoulder to shoulder, right? Yeah, shoulder to shoulder. Horseshoe is going to match up here. Great for CQB distance. At 50 yards, it's going to be, the horseshoe is going to be roughly twice the width of a man. That works great. At 100 yards, the horseshoe is going to be 1/5. I'm sorry, no, the man is going to be 1/5 the size of the horseshoe. So when the horseshoes are that big, all right, picture my arms now going, I don't know, let's say 10 feet in each direction or 8 feet in each direction. That's hard to, you know, it's hard to center the man inside a circle that big. So now that problem, now that's a problem you're having at 100 yards, right? Where you're having trouble centering your man, right, or centering the target at 100 yards. So at 100 yards, it's less of an emergency situation. Okay, at 100 yards, if the threat's at 100 yards, your first thought should be get to cover, right? That may not be an option at CQB distance, but at 100 yards, you get to cover. You've got time to get to cover, look through the scope. Either you can put your illumination on, or you can basically dial up from 1x to 2x. If you do that, when you dial up to 2x, all of a sudden the inner horseshoe, right, because that has an outer horseshoe, which is the outer horseshoe is 120 MOA, but then the inner horseshoe is 14 MOA. So what happens is when you go up to 2 power, now it's bigger. You can see it. You can put it on your man. So you've got two options at 100 yards: either put on the illumination, or go from 1 power to 2 power. And at 100 yards, you've got the time to do it. Right? First, you get the cover, then you take your time and you figure out what you got to do to the scope so that you can see your target better. So I would rather have a problem with the threat at 100 yards than have a problem with the threat at 15 yards. Okay, so that's why between these two scopes, I think that the M10 design that's in the GLX is a better design. You're always going to be, there's always compromises to be made, right? You give up something, you gain something. Okay, so the 65 MOA circle is ideal, right? But the problem is that the 65 MOA circle is of a size that if they made the horseshoe 65 MOA, first of all, if they made it a complete circle, there's mill lines underneath. There's a Christmas tree with mill dots and stuff like that. So first of all, they couldn't use a complete circle, right? Because that mill grid or ball drop compensator is underneath. So that's why they had to go to the horseshoe, right? And then what's happening is the auto ranging, so that you can basically judge the distance, right? Use the size of a man to judge the distance. That has to be that ends up being at a spot where the 65 MOA circle interferes, right? So they had a choice. They're either going to shrink down that horseshoe and put the auto ranging on the outside, or enlarge the horseshoe and put the auto ranging on the inside. Okay, so the auto ranging is either going to go on the inside of the horseshoe, or it's got to go on the outside of the horseshoe. It gets a little confusing if they try to go through it, right? Although I've seen ways to do it, and I think they did experiment with a method where the auto ranging kind of went through the horseshoe. But these are the choices you got to make, right? These are the different compromises that you have to make. You know, where's the horseshoe going to be? Where's the auto ranging lines going to be? So between these two scopes, right, with the M8, they decided that the auto ranger is going to go on the outside of the horseshoe, and with the M10, they decided that the auto ranger is going to go on the inside of the horseshoe. Okay, let me give you some sizes. And again, the reason why I'm giving you these sizes is so that because this information doesn't only apply to primary arms reticles. You can look at a different reticle from a completely different company, and whatever they have, whether they have leader lines or they have a circle, if you can figure out the space between these two, you'll be able to determine based on the information that I gave you what's going to work best at what distances. And then figure out if that's where's it for sure, and is that acceptable for you? Okay, so with the M8, right, in the PLX, that's the one that has the 40 MOA horseshoe. The reason why I know it's 40 MOA is because I can use the reticle itself to measure the horseshoe because it's in mils. So that horseshoe measures 12 mils going across, right, which converts into 40 MOA, and the chevron measures 1 mil, which basically is 3.4 MOA. Okay, so on the M10, right, that's in the GLX scope, the horseshoe measures 40 mils going across, which converts into 120 MOA. Okay, and then there's an inner horseshoe that measures 4 mils, that converts into 14 MOA, and then the chevron is about a half mil, which converts into 2 MOA. Okay, so my opinion from having tested this out, having a paper target out there that's the width of a man, you know, and basically half the size of a man. Those targets are belt to head, shoulder to shoulder that I have there. So having tested this out, and and not just with those, but also doing some moving and shooting, low light shooting. I truly believe that it's more important that you be able to get on the target faster at CQB distance than at further distances. Okay, so I think the M10 reticle, right, the one that's in this 1 to 10 GLX scope, I think that's the better choice. Okay, because that's going to work really good at 15 yards. It's going to work really good at 50 yards, and then at 100 yards, you try to take some cover, and then you decide if because at 100 yards it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be hard to center the target inside that big horseshoe. So now you decide if you're going to put on the illumination or if you're going to zoom up to 2 power. Okay, in which case it's going to work just great for you. Okay, with the other one, with the M8, works great at 100 yards, works great at 50 yards, but at 15 yards, that horseshoe shrinks down to a quarter the width of a man. Really hard to center on target, especially if you've got a black edge reticle on a black target. Really hard. Okay, so some information for you guys to think about and work with, and and again, like, you can take this information and apply it to other reticles. All you gotta do is just find out the size of the subtensions. How big is this? How big is whatever they're giving you, whether it's leader lines or a circle or a horseshoe. How big is it? And then once you know how big it is, you'll know where it's going to where it's going to be strongest, where it's going to be weakest. Okay, so if they give you a 65 MOA circle or horseshoe, that's going to be great. That's going to work at 15, 50, and 100 yards. But the problem is if they try to put other information in there, like auto ranging, bullet drops, whatever, it's going to get a little bit cluttered. Okay, if they shrink it down, right, to 40 MOA, it's going to work great at 100 yards. It's going to work great at 50 yards, but at 15 yards, it's going to be a little too small. Okay, if they go in the other way, if they try to enlarge the circle, right, and make it 120 MOA, that's going to work great at 15 yards. It's going to work great at 50 yards, but at 100 yards, what's going to happen is the circle is going to be too big, and your target is going to be really small inside of it, and then you got to find a different way to kind of center, right? Either put on illumination or zoom up to a higher magnification. Okay, so drop some comments, check your subscriptions, give me a like. It helps spread the information out there, push the algorithm, and I'll talk to you all soon. Hey everyone, I want to give you guys a chance to get a close look at this information that I have here. Okay, so on the top here, that's the M8, right? You can see that measures 12 mils across, which translates into 40 MOA, 1 mil chevron, which translates into 3.4 MOA, and then the M10 here, okay, that one is 40 mils going across, which translates into 120 MOA. The inner horseshoe is 4 mils, which translates into 14 MOA, and then that chevron is half mil, which translates into 2 MOA. Okay, so in case you're wondering, mils versus MOA, basically they're both angular measurements. Okay, so basically we're talking about measuring in angles. So mils, MOA, and degrees are the same concept. Okay, so up here I got some notes. So 1 degree is 17 mils. Okay, 1 degree is 60 MOA. Okay, so you can go back and forth from degrees to mils to MOA. It's just it's the same thing. It's just a different way of it's like having centimeters or inches. Same thing. Now the reason why we don't use degrees is because, like I said, 1 degree is 17 mils, or 1 degree is 60 MOA. So we'd be talking in decimal points, right? We'd be talking like a 0.002 degree. It gets confusing. So mils and MOA are a finer measure. That's why we use mils and MOA. Now, a lot of people say that MOA is too fine of a measure, right? Because that's, 1 degree is 60 MOA. Whereas mils is 1 degree is 17 mils, so that's less fine. It's a little bit easier to work with, okay? But I just wanted you to understand mils versus MOA versus degrees now, right? Now over here, I've got some images, right? So on this line over here, we've got the M8, that line over there, the 65 MOA, and that line over there, the M10, okay? And basically I got 15 yards, 50 yards, and 100 yards, and I show you over here what the picture look like. So the blue, that's the blue square is the width of a man going across, okay? And then the circle is basically the horseshoe, okay? So over here with the M8, you can see that at 15 yards, that horseshoe is tiny across his across his chest. Whereas over here with the M10, the opposite is true, right? So at 100 yards, the man is tiny compared to the horseshoe, okay? So if you look at all these images over here, the square is the width of the chest, and then the circle is the horseshoe, and then you can see how basically the only ones I have a problem with are the M8 at 15 yards or the M10 at 100 yards. All the others, we're dealing with a factor of 1 or a half. Whether it's half big or, so that works out pretty good, okay? So anyway, I just wanted to give you this information here. If you want, you can take a screenshot of it and use it for reference.